Hello everyone, thank you so much for stopping by the channel. If you're new, please consider subscribing, and to all of you who are returning, I thank you so much for coming back. Everyone, please leave me your comments to let me know what you think about this topic, and also give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. This just helps the channel to grow. So thank you so much. Today we are back with another storytelling antics of the governing body, and we're going to be talking about Jonah. So today's discussion is going to be a little bit different from the others. First of all, because they have written 2 articles about Jonah, so we're going to be talking about both of those in this video. Also, as you know, Jonah has an entire book. Even though it's only 4 chapters, he has an entire book dedicated to his name. Normally, the articles that we discuss, the organization has taken just a few scriptures and embellished all of these details about the characters. But this time we have an entire book. Now, what is different about this way that they did this article or these articles is that they are deliberately misleading the reader. And we're going to see very early on how they did this, okay? So without further ado, let's just get started. The first article is entitled, "He Learned from His Mistakes." And as is customary, they start off trying to pull the reader in. They're talking about Jonah on this ship, that he could not shut out the terrible sounds, the fierce wind, and the mountainous waves that were crashing up against the ship, and how the screams of the mariners were just making the situation far worse. But now let's start with paragraph 2 and see what they say. What had put Jonah in such dire straits? He had made a serious mistake in his dealings with his God Jehovah. What had he done? Were matters beyond repair? The answers can teach us much. For example, Jonah's story helps us to see how even those with genuine faith can go astray and how they can make amends. So, of course, it's assumed that Jonah has genuine faith, okay? But what I'm going to do is jump a little bit ahead with this scripture that I'm going to read so that you can see what I'm saying regarding them misleading the reader. Okay, so now everybody knows the story about Jonah. He was given this commission, he flees, but then eventually, after being vomited out of the big fish, he ends up completing the assignment. And in Jonah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, we get a peek into Jonah's mindset about this whole situation and why he ran. So I'm sure, like I said, most of you know this, but I'm gonna just read it so that we're all on the same page, okay? But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to Jehovah, "Oh Jehovah, is this not what I said when I was still at home? That is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." Okay, so we see that what Jonah is saying is the reason why he fled is because he knew that God was going to change his mind about bringing this calamity. He knew that he was a God who relents. So let's see what they say in the article, though. So first of all, they start talking about how Jonah was a prophet and that he faithfully carried out his assignment as this prophet, even though it really doesn't say anything about his assignment. In 2 Kings 14:24, you can go ahead and read that if you would like. But this is what the article says. One day, though, Jonah's life took a dramatic turn. He received an assignment from Jehovah that he found to be extremely difficult. What was Jehovah asking him to do? So this is when it's going to start. We are on the same page that we know the scriptures say the reason why Jonah fled was because he knew God was going to change his mind. But let's see how they start trying to prime the reader to think that it's a different reason why Jonah ran. So in paragraph 6, Jehovah told Jonah, "Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim against her that their badness has come up before me." It is not hard to see why this assignment might have appeared daunting. Nineveh lay some 500 miles to the east, an overland journey that would likely take about a month on foot. However, the hardships of such a trek might have seemed the easy part of the job. At Nineveh, Jonah was to deliver Jehovah's judgment message to the Assyrians, who were notoriously violent, even savage. If Jonah had seen little response among God's own people, what could he hope to see among those pagans? How would a lone servant of Jehovah fare in vast Nineveh, which would come to be called the city of bloodshed? So we see a couple things. They're leading the witness, you can say, by these certain things that they say, okay? It is not hard to see why this assignment might have appeared daunting, okay? That doesn't mean it was, but they're saying it might have appeared that way. And then they start talking about how far Nineveh was and that it took a month to get there on foot, okay? But then they say the hardship of the trek might have seemed like the easy part of the job. So they're still saying might, okay? But now let's go on to paragraph 7 and see what they say. Such thoughts may well have occurred to Jonah. We do not know. What we do know is that he ran. So see how they say. Such thoughts may well have occurred to Jonah. We do not know, which is true. They don't know because that's not in the Bible. These things that they're trying to build up as far as Nineveh being so far and these people being savage as far as being a reason why he had a problem with this. It doesn't say that. So they're right to say, we don't know. But then they say, what we do know is that he ran. But what they should be saying is they know why he ran. But they're just saying what we do know as if that's all that they know. Okay, so I thought that that was interesting the way that they phrased that. So now Jonah is talking about how Jonah was determined to get away from this assignment. Paragraph 8. Does this mean that we can dismiss Jonah as a coward? We should not be too quick to judge him. As we shall see, he was capable of remarkable personal courage. Like all of us, though, Jonah was an imperfect human struggling with a great many faults. Who of us has never grappled with fear? See how they slyly threw that question in there? There is nothing indicating in this whole book of Jonah that it was anything to do with fear. But they asked the witness reader, who of us has never grappled with fear? Most people would be able to relate to grappling with fear. So most people would say, yeah, we've all grappled with fear, right? So they'll be able to put themselves in this place of a possibility that there was some fear surrounding this assignment, even though the Bible didn't say that. But let's see how they continue to build this up to get you in that mindset. It may occasionally seem that God asks us to do what strikes us as difficult, even impossible. Then it starts talking about how we might find preaching the good news difficult and all of this stuff. And then it says it's all too easy for us to forget the profound truth that Jesus uttered. All things are possible with God. If at times we lose sight of that truth, perhaps we can understand Jonah's difficulty. Okay, what though were the consequence of Jonah's flight? Okay, so now they try to say that how God may occasionally ask us to do what strikes us as difficult. But as we all know, God is not going to be asking any Jehovah's Witnesses to do anything. It will be the organization. According to this biblical story, Jonah was asked by God to do something. But they're trying to relate what will be going on in this modern day with what happened with him. knowing that Jehovah is never going to be asking you to do anything difficult. It's going to be this organization. But of course, you getting in this mindset of being able to relate to Jonah's situation would make you more apt to listen when Jehovah via the organization gives you something difficult to do. Okay, so now let's move on. We can just imagine Jonah getting himself situated on that vessel, likely a Phoenician cargo ship. He watched as the captain and his crew bustled about to get their craft underway and out of port. As the shoreline slowly receded and disappeared, Jonah may have hoped he was escaping the danger he so dreaded. But suddenly the weather changed. Okay, so then it starts talking about how, the storm starts and all of this stuff. But see how they slickly went from this might have been his reason. This might have seemed daunting. This might have been why he would be feeling this way, and turning it around, asking the witness reader about feeling fear. Okay. Now they're coming out and blatantly saying it. He may have hoped he was escaping the danger he so dreaded. So now the reader is pulled in, thinking that it actually has to do with this danger that he was thinking that he was going to face. But as we read, that was not his reason for not wanting to go. Okay. So as we know, they start yelling out to their gods, these mariners, and then they cast lots trying to figure out who was responsible. Jonah had fallen asleep. He comes up and offers to be thrown out of the ship to stop the storm because he knew it was about him. So now we read, hardly the words of a coward, are they? It must have warmed Jehovah's heart to see Jonah's brave, self-sacrificing spirit in that dire moment. Here we see Jonah's faith at its best. We can imitate it today by putting the welfare of others ahead of our own. When we see someone in need, whether physically, emotionally, or spiritually, do we not give of ourselves in order to help out? How we please Jehovah when we do so. Okay, so like I said before, they always use faith in these different ways that really don't have to do with faith. If anything, when he was telling them to throw him over, he would have been showing concern for them because he knew he put them in this situation. He would have been showing love. Okay? So why are they saying faith? Faith would have been if he assumed that by him throwing himself over, or when he threw himself over, he was having faith that God would rescue him after he did that. But we all know that that's not how the story actually is going. He thought he was going to drown the way it describes it in the Bible. So it really doesn't sound like it was anything to do with faith. It sounded like it was just out of concern for putting them in this situation. But anyway, let's go ahead and continue. So he's in the belly of the fish. Here we go. This is what they say in paragraph 21. There, in the unlikeliest of places, the inward parts of the fish, Jonah learned that salvation is something that Jehovah can bring to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Even there, Jehovah found and saved his troubled servant. Only Jehovah could keep a man alive and well for 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish. It is good for us to remember today that Jehovah is the God in whose hand your breath is. We owe our every breath, our very existence, to him. Are we grateful? Do we not then owe Jehovah our obedience? Okay, so this one, they are really trying to get in this whole gratitude and obedience. Okay, but let me first start where they say that he was in the inward parts of the fish. I thought that was funny. I'm like, what is the other part that he would be in? Like, that made no sense to me. But then it says how Jonah learned that Jehovah can bring salvation to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And it says even there, Jehovah found and saved his troubled servant. And I'm like, well, didn't he put him there? So it wasn't too hard to find him because he knew exactly where he was, right? But again, they try to turn this around to the witness because they start talking about how Jehovah is responsible for your very breath. And if you're grateful for that, do you not then owe him your obedience? But we all know that obedience to Jehovah is equivalent to obedience to this particular organization. So, of course, they can't come out and say that, but that's what it boils down to. If you're appreciative for what God has given you, which is the breath, the very breath that you're breathing, you need to show obedience to him, but it's really to this organization. And of course, witnesses, would not be none the wiser when they read that. They're going to just fall right in line. Okay, so now, what about Jonah? Did he learn his gratitude to Jehovah through obedience? He did. After 3 days and 3 nights, the fish brought Jonah right to the shore and vomited out Jonah onto the dry land. Imagine, after all that, Jonah did not even have to swim ashore. Of course, he did have to find his way from the beach, wherever it was. Before long, though, his spirit of gratitude was put to the test. Let's see. Oh, then it said Jonah 3:1-2 says, Then the word of Jehovah occurred to Jonah the second time, saying, Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to her the proclamation that I am speaking to you. What would Jonah do? Okay, so now again, they're focusing in on this whole gratitude and obedience. So did he learn to show his gratitude through obedience? That's what they're asking. And obviously, we all know the story. He ends up going to Nineveh. But really, if you really think about this, if this really were a real story, I know some people are Bible believers and they definitely believe that this is facts. But just think about that. Yes, you would be grateful to be out of the belly of this fish if this actually happened. But at that point, if you go ahead and do this assignment, is it really about gratitude as far as why you're doing it? I mean, if you really just think about that, because you probably would be doing it at that point because you pretty much have no choice. You already tried to run, and then you was faced with this storm to the point where the storm was about to kill everybody if you didn't get yourself thrown overboard. And then you get swallowed up by a fish, and you're in there for 3 days and 3 nights, and the fish vomits you out, and then you're told again, go do this thing. Who in their right mind would not at that point? So, of course, they're just making it seem like his gratitude gave him this obedient spirit. But really and realistically, it will probably just be that he just wouldn't have wanted to experience something like that again, if you really think about that. But, of course, they say Jonah did not hesitate. We read, at that Jonah got up and went to Nineveh in accord with the word of Jehovah. Yes, he obeyed. Clearly, he had learned from his mistakes. In this, too, we need to imitate Jonah's faith. We all sin, we all make mistakes, but do we give up? Or do we learn from our mistakes and turn to a course of obedient service to God? One thing I want to draw your attention to is how they say he had learned from his mistakes. What exactly are you guys calling a mistake? Because this was a decision. Aren't we all free moral agents? Don't we all have free will? Isn't that what that means? He made a decision. He didn't make a mistake. He knew exactly what he was doing. Okay? But obviously he was stopped in his tracks and he was unable to not, he was pretty much forced into doing something that he obviously didn't want to do. But they're trying to turn it around and make it seem like he learned from this situation because, of course, as witnesses, when you're disciplined and all of these things and you go astray from the organization, you're supposed to learn from your mistakes and come back to loyal submission and obedience to Jehovah, or in other words, this organization. So they're trying to make it seem like that's exactly what happened to him, but there is no indication that he learned anything from this or that it was even a mistake, okay? So at the end of the last paragraph, it says, Jehovah wants to bless you too. Like Jonah, will you learn from your mistakes and display an obedient, selfless spirit? So again, as you guys notice, there was no mention of the actual reason that we read in Jonah 4, 1 and 2, or 1 through 3, about why Jonah actually ran. They skirted everywhere around it to try to make you think that it had to do with him being afraid of this assignment, okay? And actually, when they quote all of the scriptures that they quote in the article, they never touch Jonah chapter 4. They just mention scriptures in chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. But now we're about to go to the next article. And on this one, they definitely start getting to chapter 4 about his reason for running. But you'll see how they try to persuade the reader into thinking that it was something other than what it actually was. Okay. And this sun is starting to get kind of bright. So I'm gonna move. So the second article is called He Learned a Lesson in Mercy. So it starts off this article talking about this whole trek that he was about to have to take, okay? And it talks about how he thought about this. He thought about the destination that he so dreaded. That's what it says towards the end of the first paragraph in this particular article. Now, let's start off in paragraph 2. One thing Jonah knew for certain, he could not turn around and run away from this assignment. He had tried that before. As we saw in the preceding chapter, Jehovah patiently taught Jonah by means of a windstorm at sea and a miraculous rescue involving a huge fish. 3 days later, Jonah was vomited out alive onto a beach, an awed and more compliant man. So, like I mentioned in the other part, he was more compliant, most definitely, because he basically had no choice. He didn't want to be in the belly of another animal, did he? So anyway, let's move on. When Jehovah ordered Jonah to Nineveh the second time, the prophet obediently headed east on the long journey. However, had he allowed Jehovah's discipline to work a thorough change in him? For instance, Jehovah had shown him mercy, saving him from drowning, holding back punishment for his rebellion, and giving him a second chance to carry out this assignment. After all of this, had Jonah learned to show mercy to others? Learning to show mercy is often difficult for imperfect humans. Let us see what we can gather from Jonah's struggle. So again, did he learn to be obedient? See, it keeps focusing in on this word. And they're asking if this discipline worked a thorough change in him, okay? And asking if he had learned to show mercy. Was he the one who wanted the people of Nineveh killed? So what are we talking about if he learned to show mercy? So they talk about how Nineveh was this ancient city and one of the first ones Nimrod established, and how it had these stately temples and mighty walls and all of this stuff. But it talks about how none of the factors as far as how large this city was or anything like that was why this city was important to Jehovah. What mattered to him were the people. Nineveh had a huge population for that time. Despite the people's badness, Jehovah cared about them. He values human life and the potential that each individual has for repenting and learning to do what is right. What I thought about when I read that was the situation with the Amalekites. How many of you know about that story where Jehovah ordered the killing of the whole entire population of people, including the babies and the animals? And I just thought about how it's just claiming that what mattered to God is the people. And of course, in this situation, that's what it seems to be saying in Jonah. But just as a general rule of thumb, that's not what it was about in the Old Testament. That is not what we've seen as far as Jehovah wanting people to repent and giving them a chance to change their ways. But then right underneath that paragraph where it tries to focus you in on the fact that Jehovah has all this love for people, it has this picture of Jonah walking through the city, apparently of Nineveh, and it's showing these ladies there with this looking like they kind of like half, naked outfits or whatever. And then this guy looking like he's doing something shady. I don't know what he got going on. And then it has a little comment under here that says, or a little excerpt under here that says, Jonah found Nineveh to be a huge city full of wrongdoing. Where are you guys getting that from? Because there is nothing about Jonah feeling like anything about this city. Nothing is said about how he felt about it at all. He was just told to go and carry out this assignment. So why are you guys trying to make it seem like he felt this way? And he would have been looking at these people like, oh, this city is just full of badness and all of this stuff. He's not the one who wanted to go there to tell them that they were going to be killed. So anyway, let's just move on though. When Jonah finally entered Nineveh, its sizable population of more than 120,000 may have made the place only more intimidating. He walked for a day, penetrating ever deeper into that teeming metropolis, perhaps looking for a suitable central location to start spreading his message. How would he reach these people? And then it says, at any rate, his message was simple and not likely to win him any favor. Only 40 days more, and Nineveh will be overthrown. He spoke out boldly and repeatedly. In doing so, he showed remarkable courage and faith, qualities that Christians today need more than ever. Okay, so a couple things in this part, you guys. So when they said that the population may have made the place only more intimidating, so they're still trying to build this thing up as if Jonah had a problem with these people, was afraid or intimidated, but there's nothing in the Bible at all to suggest this. But now this was interesting too. They said that he spoke out boldly and repeatedly. In doing so, he showed remarkable courage and faith, qualities that Christians today need more than ever. So let's read this scripture that they list, which is Jonah 3:4. And it says, on the first day Jonah started into the city, he proclaimed, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overturned. The Ninevites, this is verse 5, the Ninevites believed God, they declared a fast, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. So where do we see it being repeatedly? But because they're trying to make it for this modern day, the modern day witness mind, they have to say that because witnesses preach all the time. So it's repeatedly. It's not just a one-time thing, right? So they say he did this, but anybody could look right in the Bible and see that it wasn't repeatedly. And they're saying it took courage and faith. But again, this would only be if he was afraid that it would take courage. But there was nothing indicating that he was afraid of these people. We see the whole thing. The people repented. The king, had everybody put on sackcloth. And of course, Jehovah ended up relenting and deciding not to destroy these people. But let's look at what the article says about God deciding not to do this. Does this mean that Jehovah decided that his own judgment about Nineveh had been in error? No. The Bible explains that Jehovah's justice is perfect. Jehovah's righteous anger against Nineveh simply abated. He observed the change in those people and saw that the punishment he had intended to bring on them would no longer be fitting. And then it goes on to say in the next paragraph, Jehovah is nothing like the rigid, cold, even harsh God so often portrayed by religious leaders. On the contrary, he is reasonable, adaptable, and merciful. When he determines to bring punishment on the wicked, he first uses his representatives on earth to issue warnings, for he is eager to see the wicked do what the Ninevites did, repent and change their ways. So this is just funny. It goes back to what I was saying before about how he is so different apparently back in the Old Testament. Even though this was in the Old Testament, this was not the norm for what God used to do as far as sending his prophets or people to preach a warning of doom and then deciding whether to carry this out based on the people's reaction. Like, that's not normally what happened, especially like when the Israelites was getting the promised land. That's not what was going on, but it says that the Jehovah is nothing like the rigid, cold, even harsh God so often portrayed by religious leaders. Like, who are you talking about? Most people talk about Jesus and how Jesus was. So I don't know what they're even talking about right there. But then they say how Jehovah is reasonable, adaptable, and merciful. And my phone is about to die. But then let's check this out. Let me see if I can hurry it up since my phone's about to die. So then it asks, how did Jonah react when destruction did not come at the time he expected it to? We read, and now they finally go to Jonah chapter 4, verse 1. To Jonah, though, it was highly displeasing, and he got to be hot with anger. Jonah even uttered a prayer that sounded like a rebuke of the Almighty. Jonah suggested that he should have stayed home on his own ground. He claimed that he knew all along that Jehovah would not bring calamity on Nineveh, even using that as an excuse for his running away to Tarshish in the first place. Now, this is what I think is so crazy about that, you guys. They say that Jonah claimed that he knew all along that Jehovah would not bring calamity on Nineveh. So why do you guys say that Jonah claimed to know how Jehovah would behave in a particular situation? Isn't that what you guys do? Isn't that what you just did in this article right here? You said, on the contrary, talking about Jehovah, he is reasonable, adaptable, and merciful. Okay? But now, even though the Bible is saying what Jonah actually said and what he actually thought about this situation, that God would relent and was the type to be merciful and would not bring the judgment or bring the punishment, you guys are trying to say that Jonah claimed that he knew. But y'all know for sure. But wasn't Jonah dealing directly with God? So this don't make any sense at all for them to say that he claimed that and then said using this as an excuse. See what I'm saying when I say they try to spin this a certain way to make you guys or make the reader think a particular way about this whole situation? He didn't use it as an excuse. It was a reason. That's why I ran. That's what he said. Okay. Now this is even crazier. In the next paragraph, what was troubling Jonah? We cannot know all that went through his mind, but we do know that Jonah had proclaimed doom to Nineveh before all those people. They had believed him, and now no doom was coming. Did he fear being ridiculed or being labeled a false prophet? Whatever the case, he did not rejoice over the people's repentance or over Jehovah's mercy. Instead, it seems he was on a downward spiral into a mire of bitterness, self-pity, and wounded pride. What the world are you guys talking about? What do you mean, what was troubling Jonah? He told you what was troubling him. Okay, but you guys are saying he's claiming like that really wasn't what it was. He's claiming that this is what the problem was. No, that's what he said. We cannot know all that went through his mind, but you do know what went through his mind. Okay, but you guys are making up other stuff going through his mind, right? About him being afraid of these Ninevites. And now you're even doing more so, talking about he was fearing being ridiculed or looking at as being a false prophet. It didn't say nothing about any of that. It didn't say anything about any of that. So as we all know the situation, Jonah gets under this plant and he's sulking and upset that Jehovah didn't bring this destruction, and Jehovah makes the plant dry up or disappear and then tries to teach Jonah this lesson. Like, how could you be more concerned about this plant than all of these people? And so in the last paragraph, or in the second to the last paragraph, it's talking about how Jonah could place more value on a single plant than he did on the lives of 120,000 humans, in addition to all their livestock. Was it not because was it not because Jonah had allowed his thinking to become selfish? After all, he felt sorry for the plant only because it had benefited him personally. Did not his anger over Nineveh spring from motives that were likely selfish? A prideful desire to save face, to be proved right? Where is all of that coming from? There is nothing about anything about that. Maybe he was upset that he had to walk for a whole entire month, but he knew that most likely Jehovah was not gonna do the destruction. That's what he said. That's what I said when I was at home. I knew you were the type to change your mind. So they built this whole thing up about how long this trek was on foot. It would take a whole month. So wouldn't you be upset if you had to go a whole month and then God changed his mind? Like, that's probably what he has going on. But they're making it seem like it has to do with this wounded pride, and it has to do with all of this other stuff and him not showing mercy and all of this other stuff. And really, he wasn't even the one who said anything about or wanted this destruction to be brought upon them. You know, this was just him fulfilling an assignment that he obviously could not get out of. So it's just pretty interesting, but it's really, really crazy, you guys, how they try to lead the reader in a particular direction that the Bible did not even say, and actually made 2 articles about this, purposely misleading. But again, this is what they do. This is what they do. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this video short. I don't want it to just cut off, but I do have some more storytelling antics videos coming out, you guys. So I thank you so much for tuning into this one, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.